and welcome to VIU Cowichan Innovation Lab Symposium. Before we begin, I would like to call upon Caitlin Beale to give a blessing to honor the traditional territories of the Cowichan people on which place we've gathered today.
Thank you everyone for coming today, and I would like to acknowledge that we are on the Cowichan territory, and we like to thank all the Cowichan people for letting us live, learn, and play on their land. So Haichka.
Before I ask our Provost, David Witty, to officially open our event, I'd like to take a moment to express our collective gratitude to him by presenting this 3D printed glow-in-the-dark thinker. Oh, that's cool. Okay. And the cedar box, which has been carved by Trevor. So the two figures represent how small ideas are realized when there's a foundation upon which they can stand. Your ability to think outside the box and to encourage and support those of us to do likewise has inspired us to bring into existence what you can see today, or some of what you'll see today. And it's because of this that we wish to express our gratitude. So please welcome our foundation, our thinker, and our provost, Dr. David Witty.
Wow. I'm almost speechless. No, seriously, I saw that box when I came in and thought, oh, is that ever beautiful? Thank you. Really.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it is a pleasure to be here. I said to Richard, well, it was 2 years ago, it seemed, whatever, where'd Richard go? I guess it was 2 years ago, wasn't it? That we were here and had a good, hey, Amen.
Nice to see you. I don't have a 3D printed object for you.
I said hi to Lynne earlier. Welcome. Thank you for the welcome. I squeal. I squeal. I want to see Alamnamau. It means I'm really glad to see you. I will as well recognize we're on the traditional territory of the Cowichan people, Cowichan tribes, and we honor that work that we do with them. There's a strong relationship here with the Cowichan tribes, their people, and we're really pleased about that. And so thank you for your words. Appreciate that. It's interesting. For me, really touched by that. But you know, far too much. There was an idea. Some of you know I like ideas and the opportunity to support ideas and stand back and see what happens. And when you look at this gathering here today and the work that's going to be presented both here and the work that's being done in Victoria, that has deep, rich connections back to VIU as well, and the work that we're doing in Nanaimo. These are ideas that and there's so many ideas, right? And for me, it speaks to the role that we play within a university, and particularly within VIU, where with not a lot of resources, the strength of our resources actually are our human resources, our students and our faculty. But you know, we don't have a lot of financial resources, and so we have to be careful how we spend those. But I remember Sally and Ian and Richard had the idea of, well, you know, a 3D printer. Oh, what's a 3D printer? Anyway, I mean, you just go from there, right? And it seemed like a good idea, so support that and support a few other things as they come along. I wish I could support a lot more. But again, you know, we struggle with our financial situation and do the best we can do. It just, for me, looking around and looking at the students here too, really is something that we're proud of at VIU as well. Strong student focus, a commitment to our students and our undergrad student applied research and how we honor that work, and we're going to honor that today. I could not miss the opportunity, though, to talk about two things dear to my heart. I'm going to read to you our VIU niche, just to remind all of us. This is something that we developed about 4 years ago now, collectively. So our faculty, our students, staff, and here's the words that we believe describes our niche. Adjacent to the rugged coastline of the Salish Sea, Vancouver Island University is proud of its unique history and culture as a teaching university that welcomes and celebrates learners from local, regional, and international communities and non-traditional students as the heart of the institution, supports and celebrates student success, provides high-quality teaching, affordable high-quality programs, and multiple ways of knowing, promotes campus communities offering small class sizes that encourage rewarding faculty-student engagement, supports Aboriginal learners and connections to Aboriginal communities, fosters a global awareness within the campus and external communities, and then lastly, promotes community engagement for students and faculty that fosters undergraduate and applied research. So that's what we think is our niche at VIU, and today I think it's really fair to say that what we're going to see here celebrates that niche. And I can't leave. I think I maybe take just one more minute. This is my copy of our academic plan. It's kind of beat up and people see me carrying it around. But I think this is important to just recognize the words here at the front end, because again, I think it speaks to what you're doing, speaking to that innovation that's really critical. So what do we see as our purpose? We say this: our purpose is, as a leader in providing high quality learning, Vancouver Island University supports the well-being of the people of Vancouver Island and coastal British Columbia by promoting a high quality of life for their communities through commitment to student success. There's that student success again. Community engagement and associated scholarship. And we list our 7 core values, and I'm not going to read them in detail, but they are learning, supporting student success, access to education, development of literacies, pursuit of lifelong learning. Another core value, discovery, and I'm just doing some snippets of the words, not all the words. Discovery, pursuit of free inquiry. Another core value of VIU, engagement with communities in our region and with our colleagues. And then the 4th one, achievement, committed to promoting the excellent success of our students, faculty, staff, and alumni. And I really see that's my job as the provost. In many ways, I'm kind of a facilitator, facilitating your success. And today, I'm rewarded by some small investments and encouragement, standing back and looking at all this wonderful activity. Diversity, maintaining learning and working environments which are equitable, diverse, and inclusive. The last 2, celebration, achievements of our students, faculty, staff, alumni, and the communities we serve. Certainly this is a celebration today, and I thank you for that, and thank you for your work. And then lastly, sustainability, supporting a healthy, sustainable environment. So, our visionary goal then to kind of wrap this up. Through the promotion of excellence in learning, we inspire our students and the people of Vancouver Island and coastal British Columbia as a trusted educational partner in the search for sustainable cultural, economic, environmental, and social prosperity. And this is one part of that journey. So thank you very much. I look forward to the presentations, and I'm going to turn it over to Richard. Thank you.
Hey, welcome to our panel on innovation, creativity and building partnerships. We've got a series of position papers. We've got quite a tight schedule, so I'm going to just dive straight into the introductions. We've got, speaking first, Daniel Burgoyne, who's chair of the English department at VIU. He's the co-author of Academic Writing and Introduction, published in its 3rd edition in 2014, and he's the editor of the Broadview edition of James DeMille's A Strange Manuscript Found in a Copper Cylinder. That's quite a mouthful. His current research focuses include Romanticism, speculative and fantastic literatures, and the Gothic. He's the co-director of the Meta Digital Humanities Lab at VIU Nanaimo. He's going to be speaking today with Maria Bassett, who is a 4th-year Bachelor of Arts student graduating this June with a major in English and a minor in sociology. Maria says that thus far she's greatly enjoyed her scope of learning, that's a relief, but is always brought back to her love of reading and literature. While she enjoys a variety of genres, she hopes to be able to further her explorations of children's literature and speculative fiction in particular. And Maria has worked with Daniel in the Meta Digital Humanities Lab for 2 years as a lead research assistant. So welcome to Daniel and Maria.
Thank you, Richard. Slides. There's a lot of stuff on there. So, hello. We've entitled our talk Encoding the Gothic in Ad Radcliffe's The Italian. So I thought we'd just start by giving you a sense of where we come from. In the Meta Digital Humanities Lab, we've been using Text Encoding Initiative, or TEI, to encode a range of texts for a range of purposes for a few years now. TEI provides a standardized way to represent digital texts, specifically to prepare them to be machine readable. Until last year, our use of TEI was fairly straightforward. For instance, in my work with James Cook, TEI allowed the digital text to resemble the graphic surface, and it prepared the text for a range of annotations and notes and performed a basic editorial function. Following a meta workshop last spring, we changed how we conceive of TEI. And today we're going to briefly explain or provide a glimpse, really, of our new approach, and then we'll reflect on its potential as a means of undergraduate collaborative research. If you squint, you can see our sponsors here, which is Canadian Foundation for Innovation, the BC Knowledge Development Fund, and the Faculty of Arts and Humanities at VIU. So basically, Maria and I, along with my other research assistant, Melissa Jones, have been working with the 18th century Gothic novels of the great enchantress Anne Radcliffe. Radcliffe's wildly popular novels were published in the 1790s for the most part. And specifically, we've been working with the Sicilian Romance, which is an early novel published in 1790, and The Italian, which is one of her later novels published in 1797. Our goal has been to encode the novels to be searched for Gothic-related themes, characteristics, and tropes, aesthetic categories, as well as related affect or feeling, literary modes, and theoretical approaches. For example, the picturesque is one of many things that we've been looking at. The picturesque is a prominent 18th century landscape and painting aesthetic that becomes incorporated into poetry and fiction in the last 2 decades of the 18th century. Rooted in travel writing and key to the picturesque landscape garden, the picturesque is an aesthetic category that tries to explain what makes a rural landscape worthy of being a picture, which is simple at a certain level and dramatically complicated at another level. As an aesthetic, it emphasized irregularity, wildness or untrained nature, roughness or texture, variety, asymmetry, point of view, and I'm going to focus on runes. One aspect of the picturesque that's sort of inestimable is the picturesque garden. And the picturesque garden involved a shift from a small, formally organized neoclassical garden to an extensive, natural-looking, picturesque landscape garden. For our purposes, two aspects of the picturesque emerge very prominently in the picturesque garden. And one is point of view, which is produced through informal design. So the design is constructed to allow for multiple oblique views meant to be experienced while one walked through it. That is, the view is everything, and it's highly constructed. You go into the garden, you walk to specific places, you position yourself in a certain way, often with a clawed glass looking backwards, and you see a certain point of view or perspective. And this constructs or frames what you're looking at. And then second, for our purpose, is the rune. So runes symbolize the wildness of nature and its capacity to overwhelm human structures. In the picturesque garden, they actually constructed runes. Okay, so they didn't build the edifice and allow it to be overwhelmed. They built it as a rune, and you could then aesthetically enjoy the symbolic limitations of being human, I guess. If we look at this painting here, we can get in a nutshell what the picturesque aesthetic encompasses. And you can see the asymmetry here immediately. You can see the roughness and the variety. But most importantly, for our point of view, the way that the trees on the left frame the structure down there in the center, right? So that the actual enclosure creates the viewpoint, and then you have that focus, which in this case is, in Hearn's painting a Gothic house, and in the example that we'll show you in a moment, it's a room. Okay, so we know that Radcliffe made use of the picturesque aesthetic in her descriptions of places. Her adaptation of the picturesque has a range of possible significance because this aesthetic was related directly to the agrarian revolution and the process of accelerated enclosure of agricultural lands between 1750 and 1815, along with increased urbanization and the rise of the middle class, especially in England. So if we can isolate instances of the picturesque in her novels, we can not only see how she's using it, but we have handholds for a broader analysis of socioeconomic issues that she addresses, such as the changing roles of women and crises in social class, for instance. And so how do we do this with PEI? And that's what we were confronted with at the beginning of this year. So first we need to create the categories or items. And this is a wonderful and often confounding activity that can consume hours of debate and apparently never end. In the end, maybe we're just reinventing the index, but it's a spectacular sort of index, and it's one that seems to constantly open and reshape itself. It really is confounding at a certain level. Here what we've done is we've adapted a standard TEI protocol which allows for lists of people and places and organizations, and what we've done is specify types. So in this case you can see aesthetic and architecture. You can see that we're able to relate categories by stipulating the one item corresponds to another. So under aesthetic, we've got picturesque, that's the item, but we've specified that it corresponds to view. In practice, this means that searches for view will also find the picturesque. Likewise, under architecture, you'll see we have rune, and we've specified that it corresponds with picturesque. So this is what the encoding actually looks like if you go into the text. The categories are placed in the header, and they'll provide directions, as it were. And this is just a paragraph from the body, and we've chosen a simple one here to begin. What you'll see is that Radcliffe actually uses the term picturesque. It's about there in this passage. So the aesthetic is actually expressed on the surface of the text. It's named, and we could just press Alt F or Control F or whatever we want and pull it up, as it were. But in this case, of course, the mere mention of the word doesn't encapsulate the experience or the instance, which really is the entire paragraph. So what we've done is we've used a segment tag at the beginning. We've identified that this is analysis, that we're not being factual, as it were. And then we've identified the item, which is picturesque. And then right at the bottom, we've got the closing of the segment. So we go through the text, identifying these segments of text and tagging them, as it were. At other times, though, the category isn't named. And in our case, here's an instance of the picturesque that isn't named. So this is just a sentence. It's a wonderful sentence, so I'll read it. It appeared duskily in the perspective, suspended between two cliffs where the road wound from sight, on one of which were the ruins of the Roman fort it belonged to, and on the other, shadowing pines and thickets of oak that tufted the rock to its base. So what you can see here is that there's an example of overlapping segments, because we've identified the picturesque as one segment, but within it we have the rune as another segment. So Maria, you're going to speak to that?
The platform of TEI provides an almost limitless space on which analysis can be performed. For instance, first person analyzing the text can tag the words, phrases, themes, characteristics, and metaphors that they see there. This analysis often depends on the individual focus of the person. Afterwards, the text can be passed along to a second or third person, and they can add their own interpretations, contributing to the text by adding as many tags as they also see appropriate. For instance, if we look at this example here, there are multiple aspects of the text tagged, and often they are overlapping. In the first sentence, if one were to be reading through the text and focusing on nationality, they would tag English, as we have right up there. And then again, if one were to be focusing on Anne Radcliffe as a travel writer writing from home about distant places which she had never visited herself, one would tag the word traveling, as we have in the corner over there. In the bottom few sentences, we come across the overlapping yet again. A focus on architecture described in the text would bring the architecture description tag that is right there, and also the two tags of portico, which show up in the whole phrase right there. But if someone were to be interested in the affect or the aesthetic response or the emotions of the text, they would be tagging things like awe, which is in the corner, and also curiosity, which is on the left right there. The tagging process, as mentioned by Daniel earlier, is also indicative of this flexible and large space. While the analyses are individual, they require those who are analyzing the text to negotiate what to focus on together. The list of tags is a group effort, rather than just being the work of one person. This encourages communication between the encoders and tends to bring about a lot of teamwork. Both of us have found that working on the TEI as a group together often turns out to be more productive than just working on it alone. Overall, this creates a more rich analysis of the text being encoded, encourages multiple minds to read and analyze the text together.
So you can hear that the activity of encoding becomes a type of reading, really, and even a way to discuss the text. And I think this is fundamental to the shift in our conception of TEI, is it has really become a means to engage with the text and with each other about what we're reading. Encoding becomes a way to formalize the questions we ask, establish standardized methods, and share findings. The research conversation can be simultaneous, say if several people work on the same text at the same time, or cumulative as one encoder passes the text on to the next reader, which is inevitably the case of novels that are 700 pages long.
Another benefit of TEI is that it lends itself to different learning aptitudes. Because of its technical nature, it encourages a different type of reading. During my English degree, I found that one of the hardest things I had to learn was how to analyze and close read text. TEI can be a platform for learning analysis and close reading in an academic setting. Most of the teaching that I've come across is catered to a limited amount of learning styles, and TEI can help broaden those. Some students, and myself in certain areas, learn better with a more technical application of learning through TEI because of the very nature of text encoding and the dividing of aspects of analysis through the tagging process. The way of learning analysis and close reading changes. Not only does TEI provide a learning platform for analysis, which can be broken down into technical parts, it also teaches teamwork, which is another really important skill to learn, and changes learning from a more individual act to a more collaborative one. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to hold off for questions until everyone's spoken. So the next speaker is Trevor Davis, and in his new role as VIU's Associate Vice President Scholarship and Community Engagement, he tells me he sees his job not so much to drum up community-related activity, but to take the time to recognise and better support activity that's already happening on and off campus. Today he's going to talk about why partnerships between universities can be greatly enhanced by focusing on community partnerships. Welcome, Trevor.
All right, thanks, Witty. So this is going to jump around a little bit today because we've started off with a very specific example. I'm sort of jumping out to a broader viewpoint here. So we've been asked to talk today a little bit about university partnerships, and so I started with that the administrative support for such a thing. So I started with that as a topic, and really when I sat down to think about it, I realized we have actually worked out a lot of the basic university-to-university administrative support. It was 10, 15 years ago, it was a lot more rudimentary. And these days we've had all kinds of drivers that have helped us do that. I mean, the tri-agencies in Ottawa have provided many millions of dollars in funding and partnership grants now, which kind of drove universities to work all this out, to smooth out the bugs for university-to-university work. I tend to think that it's all happening at the faculty level. It's the relationships between faculty at different universities. So short of setting up a really good dating service for faculty, there's not too much more that administrators can do other than support once faculty actually make those connections. So I think my main job on the administrative side is focusing a little bit more on the outside world and to sort of not necessarily insulate, but to be prepared for where things are going and to help smooth that kind of transition. So, and what I also want to talk about today is sort of talk about that a little bit and segue into talking about a different kind of partnership, one that's not so well supported by federal agencies and could be something that's useful between institutions, and that's partnerships between universities and communities, and how that can be a catalyst for a different kind of partnership. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about where universities might be going. And I think we in Canada are a little bit insulated from this. Out there in the rest of the world, I think there's a bit more of an eye on the change in the university system. I saw it a lot when I was working a couple of years ago down in the States on a project related to a Gates Foundation grant on the next generation universities. And in the States, they've been grappling with this for a while now. And I think right now, institutions in Canada are a bit more in the reactive stage to what's going on than to be proactive. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So AUCC released a series of studies over the last decade. The last one was about 3 years ago, looking at various trends in the system. And the latest one they focused on was trends in student enrollment. But I think that's the only real big national studies I've seen on these sorts of trends, and apart from in narrow sectors. And I don't think these really capture the full range of possible trends. So I had a look around a little bit outside of Canada and came up with a couple of examples. And of course, as I talk about trends and where universities are going, we're talking about universities here. So there's, of course, lots of debate about whether this is actually happening and whether there's actually these 1,000-year-old institutions are ever going to actually be changed by things in the outside world. So there's good debate about that one. So to start with, I'm going to talk about a few of the drivers that are making universities or forcing universities towards change. One is changing participation rates. So in Canada, this is Canadian stats up to 2010 with projections going forward, and this was out of AUCC. Rates have grown steadily, as you can see. And the changing participation rates have actually helped to balance some of the demographic shifts that we've been seeing lately. That may change over the next decade. Worldwide, this is post-secondary participation rates worldwide. This is including universities and other types of post-secondary. But you can see the idea that it's steadily increasing and increasing substantially in particular sectors. I mean, there's our world down at the bottom there. But you can see some of the major changes that are happening in China and some of that sector of the world. At the same time, we've got a changing funding model. And so that's some more AUCC data, just talking about, as David's well aware of, the shift on the left side from the tuition versus government funding, how that balance has been changing. And this nicely shows the balance since 1982. And again, federal transfers for post-secondary funding, which has steadily been dropping. Most of this, I think most people in the post-secondary sector are aware of. The US has more of a demand-driven model, and that's what's driven them towards things like the Gates Foundation trying to fund new types of institutions. Australia adopted a demand-driven model 3 years ago, and some of the information I have today is drawn out of sort of the angst that's created in the university sector and the changes that are happening or on the horizon down there. And we have a little bit of this happening in BC. We've got these job categories that we have to look at fitting some of our activities into. And we also have to meet some specific enrollment targets. And Canada is slowly sliding a bit more towards a demand-driven funding model, potentially. So that's driver number one, changing participation rates. Driver number two, and I think I just jumped ahead there, digital technologies. So advances in digital technologies are the one that we often talk about, and that's one of the topics today. They've been massively disrupted in some industries, and you can think of the ones of retail, music, entertainment, things like that. And the fear is, of course, that this will happen in the post-secondary sector as well. Now, MOOCs, massive online courses, they're usually quoted as the big potential disruptor out there. And many academics would contest that, and there's a lot of debate that goes back and forth about whether MOOCs are the big change on the horizon or whether they're something that's now reducing in popularity and have kind of seen their day and are gone. But I think MOOCs are just an early stage example of the search for new models for post-secondary. The models that are going to be the big disruptors in our sector are going to be the next generation after MOOCs. The MOOC idea may be part of it, some sort of blend. The same way that online businesses, big push at the beginning. Now what's really sorted out now is the combination of online businesses, traditional businesses. That's really where things have gone. So I don't think we've seen what the actual true disruption is going to be there. And I don't think in any way that these new technologies, as some would predict, are going to cause campuses to wane and disappear. But they have begun to transform what our students expect. Driver number 4 is globalization. And so I was showing you one, and this is another example. This is where Canada draws its international students from overall. So as global mobility is increasing for both students and the universities going out there, the world is going to change. And more students, as we know, are seeking international experiences these days. But at the same time, places like China, which are the traditional source countries for international students, are now becoming global scale destinations for our students. And so that whole world is changing as well. And we've got now over 250 international branch campuses, universities that have branches out there somewhere internationally, mostly dominated by the big university players in the market. And those are the same big players that have tended so far to dominate the MOOC market. And driver number 5, integration with industry. So this is just a quick example. VIU is already, in one way, aligned with industry, more than many universities would be through our long-standing trades programs and connections with industry out there. But across Canada, we're also seeing a bigger shift in funding, where alignment with industry is becoming a driver for federal research funding, for example. So it began with industrial-related programs such out of NSERC, out of the Natural Sciences and Engineering Councils, and that had been going on for quite a while, led to a large investment in the college and the polytechnic sector. And this is now shifting over to include the SSHRC funding model. And so as of this year, they've launched their own college-related program, but all these programs require industry partnership in order to actually receive money to get going. So how can universities respond to all these changes? There's a couple of different ways, and I'm going to take a look at it from a little bit more of an industrialist perspective to begin with, because we often, at this point, start looking at the business model, how businesses responded to this kind of change. Well, the big one, the most obvious one is number one, do nothing. And the biggest universities may be able to get away with doing nothing because they have the research funding that they're able to achieve is in a mode right now of the big get bigger. That is how things have been going federally. And so, for example, the latest big push for funding is the Canada Excellence Research Fund. And that is targeted very much at the extremely large institutions who, at the end of the day, will receive $50, $80 million in funding for huge projects. With those sort of things going on, they can weather out the storm of all the other kinds of changes, or many of them anyway. The second possible response, and these are getting sort of more extreme as we go forward, is to streamline. And I think that's where many institutions are focusing right now. Streamline your operations, streamline your assets. And so, at the same time, incorporate new models of teaching and learning and student engagement. So, for example, the idea of streamlining your assets. Classrooms used for 4 days a week, maybe 5 days a week for 2 semesters a year. So looking at that as a business model, you're only 100, 120 days a year, your classrooms are actually being used. So streamlining that model so that the institution's being used more and more efficiently. And then we're getting all to the point where we're starting to outsource what you'd call the back office functions, the administrative functions. So more and more interinstitutional connections, shared service arrangements, and also starting to look at how do we get IT, how do we get other things off the campus to cut down on our models, this streamlining process. And at the same time, developing connections with the K-12 sector, industry, and with other institutions. And I think the next big leap in that some institutions have focused on, and this is what I really learned from working in the US on their particular work, on their particular response to this, is a niche focus. And so that's where you still do most of the things I've been talking about so far, but this time you focus on a more narrow niche market. You figure out who your clients are going to be and you specialize. So you go after, for example, nothing but mature distance learning students. That becomes your niche. And institutions start to specialize, and this in a way actually reduces the ability to collaborate between institutions. So you focus everything on your marketing, on your area of strength, that type of thing. And that usually requires a fairly strong alliance with industry. And the fourth one here is transformative. And these are some things that have been tried out in the States and other places in the world. This is a completely new style of university. So we've seen a little bit of that with some of the private sector ones in Canada with Quest and things like that. But you have these specialty universities such as degree aggregators, which go out there and don't really exist. They just aggregate courses from different institutions. You pull these credits together and we give you a parchment at the end of the day. All online institutions, they're out there now. Or being specialists in one part of education, such as just certification. So that's being explored in a variety of areas right now. Most of these are all sort of new. Some of these virtual universities have been in place for maximum 2-3 years, still being tried out. But I think when you get to that point, you're starting to really treat the university as just another kind of business. You're using business models and business metrics, and you're really seeing the university as a business. So I think there is another way to approach this. And it takes a very different approach, and that's community ownership and community partnership. So universities aren't just businesses that work to develop a brand loyalty in their students. They're really in the business of transforming lives and developing loyalty through a genuine connection, not a brand connection, with something that's, for most students, I think, it's something larger than yourself, the university itself, or with individuals who are completely dedicated to teaching and mentoring mentoring. That's where the connections actually happen. And universities also exist in context with their communities. They're often integral parts of the cities or the towns that they're in, and we see one right here. So while we've still got to do some of these other things to keep our heads above water financially, we've also got to put some significant effort into that one, into deepening that type of connection. And there's a number of ways. I'll just point to a few. Using this is a nice little classification scheme I ran across from the U.S. Office of Community Partnerships, and it kind of helps lay them out. So these are different ways that the universities can really increase their integration with community. One is a fairly classic one, service learning courses where students engage as part of their coursework. Another one is called service provision, where you've got coordinated long-term projects with faculty and student involvement. So an example is doing a neighborhood revitalization. Then you've got faculty involvement, where faculty are the driving force behind a variety of community activities, still through their role as faculty. You've got student volunteerism, where students outside of class, but still organized by the university, are working out in the community. You've got community in the classroom, and that's designing university courses that are working on community capacity, that are working on something out there. You have applied research, and this is a specific kind of applied research where students and faculty work on data collection and analysis of issues of importance to the community, often as part of their classwork. And then you've got the big one, which is major institutional change. And VIU is partway down this road and doesn't actually have a lot of the problems because huge organizational changes have to happen in many of the big research universities in order to allow them to promote more community engagement, because their model has existed for so many hundreds of years in a certain mode. I think this is the fifth major type of change, and this one also responds to those drivers that we're talking about here. Universities adapting to better focus on community engagement. So for me, the idea of collaboration and partnerships really starts by focusing on the communities around us. And I think in the end, we aren't really businesses. And so if we solely adopt business models to adapt to these big changes, we kind of give up our essence as institutions. The fact that we're really there for our communities and for our students, not to maximize our profit. And we need to keep that particular thing in our sights. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Professor Ray Siemens, who's Canada Research Chair in Humanities Computing and Distinguished Professor in the Faculty of Humanities at the University of Victoria in English and Computer Science. My introduction might be longer than his talk. He's the founding editor of the electronic scholarly journal Early Modern Literary Studies, and his publications, among many, include Blackwell's Companion to Digital Humanities, Blackwell's Companion to Digital Literary Studies, those titles are very similar, a social edition of the Devonshire manuscript, and Literary Studies in the Digital Age. He directs the Implementing New Knowledge Environments projects, the Digital Humanities Summer Institute, which we'll hear more about later, and the Electronic Textual Cultures Lab, and serves as Vice President of the Canadian Federation of the Humanities and Social Sciences for Research Dissemination, recently serving also as Chair of the International Alliance of Digital Humanities Organisations Steering Committee. So please welcome Ray Siemens.
Thanks. It's wonderful to have the opportunity to celebrate with you, celebrate innovation, celebrate the work of the lab, and just to be with wonderful people in this type of setting. Wonderful people include our panelists. And I wouldn't mean to suggest that they would ever exclude our panelists, but the two talks that have preceded mine covered some of the ground I wanted to perhaps gesture towards. So thank you for doing me that favor. I'm glad we're aligned when we think of TEI and the way in which it structures and makes available literary data in larger contexts and enriches us because of that. But also the way that it, I think, leads into the institutional context, Trevor, you were talking about too, and how partnership figures in there, and understanding possibilities of the way forward, especially through partnership, and how that can help inform the sorts of decisions we're making today. So, I'm going to say something completely different than I thought I was going to say up here, and part of it will involve me just going over here and maybe putting up something different on the screen. So maybe I should thank you also for being patient as I do something different than I thought I might do originally.
Is this a daring life
Think so?
That's a lot of fun.
Is this on S-Whisp by any chance?
So, there we go. Originally, I thought the framing title for my talk would be something like Mutual Benefit and Reciprocity in Partnerships and Collaborations. But I think, given what I'd like to say, and will form, I hope, coherently in my mind over the next 5 minutes as I say it, it would be probably better captured by a title like Life in the Skunk Works, or A Place for Everything and Everything All Over the Place. Some of you know I've got deep roots with VIU, and formerly when it was called Malaspina University College, and I had the pleasure of being colleagues of some of you in the mid-90s, which were wild days intellectually, I think, up in Nanaimo, at least. Duncan, I know, has been more staid and traditional. And I think maybe a few of us had the pleasure and privilege of being involved in the very last English departmental meeting water gun fight. This is important. This is important, particularly when we want to look at the creative and innovative angles as they relate to things like institutional planning. Super important, as they relate to what appears to be a certain type of rigidity when one digitizes and makes things computational. As is the case with TEI, ultimately a very flexible system, but it imposes a certain type of regular systematized thinking. The Skunk Works gives us a tremendous model to understand how individual and group creativity can inform those larger models. I put this up just in case people can read or want to read that. Maybe I can make the text a little bit larger. Let me see. Sorry? Control plus, thank you. There we go. The Skunk Works is a place of creativity which largely involves small groups of people who come together with specific purpose, and that purpose can be to brainstorm, that purpose can be to innovate in and around aviation technology, as is the derivation of the word. It can also be people who are interested in coming together and looking at the intersections of the arts and humanities and computation, which is one of the things we're celebrating today, and we celebrated several years ago. We celebrate when we have the pleasure of welcoming members of this group down to our electronic textual cultures lab activities too. The Skunk Works really focuses on that type of creativity, that type of innovation. And in fields in the arts and humanities, acknowledgement of the Skunk Works approach has become terribly important recently too. Particularly when one takes a look at the types of discussions that have been taking place in the, say, theoretical rarefied air of many of the disciplines that are represented in the arts and humanities. Where, for example, there was in the 1960s and early 70s something called the theoretical turn, where we went from, say, actually reading texts in certain specific close ways to imagining contexts for those texts, to imagining overarching interpretive and engagement types of strategies, some community-derived, some derived from the rarefied air of intellectual culture, disconnected from independent or localized community concerns. Now, a couple of years ago, there's been a movement that's moved away from that theoretical turn. It's sometimes called the pragmatic turn, where we start looking at how that theoretical component has a praxis component, has a component that extends beyond the mind experiment of theory and works towards a material manifestation of it. Say in the 3D thinker that Dave, you got before, the beautiful thing. You'll be looking at it in the dark, I'm sure, later. But that's a manifestation of an idea. Someone had the idea not only of the thinker, but of imitating the thinker, and then figuring out how to model it so that it could be manifest on one of these machines. And then understanding it in context beyond the idea, but the manufacture of it. This is a really important point of community engagement. This is a really important point of partnership, because once you go beyond the phase of the thought experiment, once you move from theory into praxis, a very important thing happens. You tend to need more than one person or one, say, like characteristic group set of ideas. You need people who have complementary skills, sometimes very diversely complementary skills, as you move beyond, again, the thought to the thing itself, the way in which the thought manifests pragmatically, materially, in reality, functionally. This is really important, and the Skunk Works model is one of the best ways of moving there quickly. Here's why I mentioned the water gun fight, which I recall in the mid-90s up in the Nanaimo campus, and thinking as I came from my PhD at University of British Columbia, that VIU, then Malaspina, was a really special place. because it was a place that allowed that. It allowed the whimsy, it allowed the play, it allowed the experimentation. It allowed us to do, in the late 90s, things that I see research-intensive universities claiming are innovative today. We did them in Nanaimo in the 1990s, and they're using that, research-intensive universities, as the basis for very large packages of research funding. What we have is special, not what we had. We still have that spirit. We have it in the lab. We have it in some of the partnerships that we have already and are continuing to build. It's a very special thing in the context of the way in which we manifest our, let's say, literary encoding, the way in which we think about that in the context of institutional plans, strategic directions. But the fact that we have that means we'll come up on top. The fact that we have that is, I think, a wonderful thing to celebrate. And if I were to talk about mutual benefit and reciprocity, where I had 15 slides prepared to talk about that, I would emphasize one thing. Through projects that we've engaged in, like the Implementing New Knowledge Environments project, funded by a SSHRC Major Collaborative Research Initiative grant, the Digital Humanities Summer Institute, founded at VIU, then still, I think, in 2001, Malice Bean University College. These big projects come out of the Skunk Works, and what makes them work across the roughly 30 partners in each of them, and not the same partners, is the fact that we've been able to imagine how to work together across different types of institutions, different types of individuals, different types of administrations, and different sectors, including community sectors that are business and industry focused, and those that are really not focused in those ways. We figured out how to work together in ways that ensure that when we do come together to do something, there is mutual benefit, not one group serving another, but both groups serving each other, advancing mutual aims and goals, and probably having a little bit of fun along the way. So my unstructured comments, thank you for inspiring me to go completely off message. It's just a real pleasure to be here and again, share in everything you've been doing.
Get a budget for those water guns from Dave Witty, I'm sure. Okay, yeah,
I've got one here.
Yeah, don't point it at me. I could carry on with the jokes, but I won't. Our next speaker is Lynne Siemens, who is an associate professor in the School of Public Administration at the University of Victoria. Her interests include academic entrepreneurship, collaboration and teamwork, with a focus on understanding methods and processes to facilitate collaborative research across distances, disciplines and organisational boundaries. She has taught workshops in project management at UVic's DHSI. I've taken that workshop, it was superb, and the University of Leipzig's European Summer School for Culture and Technology. She's serving as management advisor for the Implementing New Knowledge Environments, major collaborative research initiative projects that Ray just mentioned, and her role includes supporting the development of governance documents, organisational structure and project management. Please welcome Lynne Siemens.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you all for having me back again. I was Googling just the program for the day, and I actually came across the schedule from 2 years ago, and it had me giving a talk, and I was like, oh no, I've misunderstood what I was supposed to do today. Oh no. So to know that I'm just giving 5 minutes this morning is big relief. What I want to do is just kind of pick up on some of the themes that we've heard already this morning and kind of put it together in a structure that will allow us to think about how to scale, how to go from small to large, from an individual to team to larger sorts of partnerships. And so if you can envision, as you will, taking any one of these pieces of beautiful artwork here with the circles, and think of this as really as a series of nested circles. That when we think about growing from small to large to partnerships, we're really thinking about, well, what are the ways that we can create more potential for creativity, for innovation, for new ideas, the capacity to take on larger scope and scale projects, even those that are more complex, certainly more than one person can ever do. But we always start at the beginning with an individual, that there's an individual that has an idea of some sort and begins to want to bring together other people within it. Now that individual, and I think VIU characterizes this from some of the anecdotes that Ray raised, is that this is someone who's collaboration ready, who's interested in working with other people. and then brings together that group of people, that different set of skills, expertise, knowledge, to in fact be able to do the project. And we've had one example already here of a faculty member and a student working together in a way that allowed more than just the faculty member might be able to do on their own. But when we think about it, we don't want teams necessarily working in isolation within an institution, because we get creativity when we bring these different groups together, and that's where we need the idea of a center or collaborative space. And VIU already has several examples of that up at the Nanaimo campus and down here at the Cowichan campus. And this brings together the various teams and projects that are already operating and puts them in contact with each other, so they begin to share ideas around research, teaching, some of their service. But we can also think of these collaborative spaces bringing together our infrastructure providers, so the IT, the library people. It's a way to bring together the administration into these discussions, and as they think about their strategic priorities. And we started off the day with going back to the strategic plan. What is it that VIU is attempting to do? But it also is a place that allows us to bring in other sorts of potential partners. And Trevor talking about the community, we can see that we'd have community members part of our collaborative spaces, because they also come to us with the project ideas of things that need to be done. And I know we've got several examples here of what's been done with community members. And really this collaborative space, and it can be physical, it will also be virtual, but it provides the equipment, further expertise, the infrastructure, other resources to allow the various teams that are operating to in fact do the great work that they want to do. But again, just as no team operates in isolation within a certain institution, no institution is in isolation as well. And the next ring of our circles is thinking about the role that we're playing at a regional level, a national level, and international level. And this is where we bring into the circle the idea of our granting agencies. And we've already given a nod to the type of work that our granting agencies do and the funding that they provide to the projects we're attempting to undertake. But we can also think about the communication infrastructure, that we need the provincial government, federal government to come in and provide the kind of communication infrastructure we need to be able to do the projects that we want to do. We think about the other institutions, not only here on the island, but across Canada and internationally, because projects these days, due to this communication infrastructure we have, are no longer limited in who our partner members might in fact be. And it's even at this level we bring in industry partners, and again, VIU with its unique role with having the trades as part of it and heavy enrollment in the tech sector here can really build on those kinds of things. But the outer ring, and the last one to think about, is these larger communities of practice that we're all members of. We've already made a note to the Digital Humanities Summer Institute that's held down in Victoria, was started here, and I think this year is its 15th year. Quite a few alumni here in the office, or in the audience rather. And we think about training institutions like that. It's again providing necessary infrastructure for teams to undertake the projects they want to take, but it also becomes another space for ideas to be traded and for people to meet each other. We think about the conferences and associations that we're all part of, and these might be disciplinary based, they may be community based, they may be industry based, but again, it's bringing together people and ideas that help support the projects we're undertaking. And the last member of this community practice, and I'm sure if we spend a bit more time over coffee, we'd come up with a few members, but even thinking about the Text and Coding Initiative and its role is providing another form of infrastructure that allow us to undertake certain kinds of projects. So all these groups as part of this outer circle provide important spaces for meeting, for developing resources, making connections, and again allows us to scale from that smaller to the larger, from the individual to the team, and accomplish those projects we're interested that allow for innovation and creativity and greater complexity than we could do on our own. Thank you very much.
I guess I'm introducing myself. So, yeah. Okay, so I'm Richard Lane. I'm Principal Investigator of the Meta Digital Humanities Lab at VIU and one of the founding members of the Innovation Lab at VIU Cowichan, which Dave Witty funded for VIU. I also serve on the Board of Directors of Innovation Island Technology Association in Nanaimo, and I'm a founding director of Social Enterprise Vancouver Island. I'm lucky enough to be an associated researcher at the Electronic Textual Cultures Lab at UVic, etc., etc., etc. I've got bored of my introduction. I think I'm going to jump straight into my own talk here instead, which is far more interesting. So I want to open with a quick strategy update from Dominic Barton, CEO of McKinsey Global, who was reporting recently in Vancouver on global development trends. And 3 of these slides are actually his, or McKinsey's. The first shows the 5 forces at work leading to global transformation at the moment: the rise of emerging markets, the power of disruptive technologies, the ageing of the global population, the changing nature of capitalism, and the return of geopolitics. BC, of course, is well positioned, if I can work this out. I've not used this before. Yeah, BC is well positioned to embrace the opportunities presented by these forces, and McKinsey's analysts, they have 22,000 analysts working on this data, suggest 6 major opportunities for BC in the areas of agriculture and food, tourism, innovation, education, infrastructure, and natural resources. Now, my focus today is on disruptive technologies and innovation as I consider partnerships and collaboration. Barton identifies 12 of the most significant disruptive technologies in the order of importance. Let's just look at the first 5: mobile internet, automation of knowledge work, the Internet of Things, cloud technology, and advanced robotics. So at VIU, we've of course been working at a small scale so far across DH and Digital Innovation Labs, research teams and training organisations. And I've got a few examples of what we've been doing. Partnership between, where are we? Meta Digital Humanities Lab and the VIU Innovation Lab, and also the way in which they've sponsored the DHSI, and of course we benefit from that by being able to attend DHSI. Also thinking about working with ETCL, as well as ETCL leaders and researchers coming up to VIU, running some great workshops here in Cowichan. We've had some wonderful workshops on desktop fabrication and so on and so forth. Also the ETCL seed funding for research and discussion groups such as the VIU UVic DH Theory Group, which took place a couple of years ago thanks to raise funding there. Broader community collaboration in the innovation sector has involved working with Innovation Island and more recently SEVI. Innovation Island is the regional driver for accelerating business success through scientific innovation and technology, mainly through our Venture Acceleration Programme, but also through providing a collaborative workspace and tech incubator which we opened recently called Square One, as well as signing more substantial partnership agreements such as the one that we just signed with Comox Valley Economic Development Society. And in our photos you've got our CEO, Paris Goudet, and the Minister of Advanced Education, Andrew Wilkinson, at our signing ceremony. And Andrew Wilkinson chaired our Emerging Technologies panel there. There's Brian Kingsit from VIU's Deep Bay Centre for Shellfish Research. He was part of this panel, gave a great paper. And there were mid-Vancouver Island entrepreneurs and tech innovators. Some really interesting stuff happening up there. Turning to Social Enterprise Vancouver Island, we launched this C3 company last week. C3 company is a community contribution company, and it reinvests 60% of its profits into social organisations and infrastructure. But more than that, C3s aim to employ the very people you set out to help in your own companies, if you get what I mean. So you're not just handing out benefits or helping people out, you're also employing the same people. So we're working with not-for-profits to provide innovation solutions through bringing together in our company tech innovators, entrepreneurs and social innovators and social enterprise leaders. Yeah, so finally then we can think of collaboration and partnerships, as Lynne was helping talk through or explore there, as clusters of researchers who collaborate within an entity, such as the Meta Lab or ETCL, and in turn those labs collaborate with one another. But we can think of another model there where you generate a dynamic research team from one individual per lab, and both Ray and Lynne spoke about that as well. So you create a kind of a broader transdisciplinary team or meta cluster. This is a very pretty picture. We're aiming, of course, for this broader scale clustering and networking. Some of the labs might want to work independently. Some of the individuals might be part of these trans structures and so on. I think all of these models work well, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be working together. That's my talk. Thank you. I've actually got 10 minutes for questions. If anyone has any questions for any of our speakers, I feel that should also include Dave Witty, as he's the man co-chairing this panel. Any questions about?
Actually, I have a question.
Go for it.
But so I'm this whole idea of innovation. So I'm really keen on that. I just don't know much other than kind of creating spaces for it to happen. So my question relates to, if you know the building, and art gallery is now moved out next month. We're renovating the base area, the first floor. We're creating a space there for students, and Trevor is creating a video lab for students. But it's always for me a question of technology. So you get Skunk Works for me. I thought that's the space. That's a Skunk's work. That's going to be a Skunk Works space, and we're going to paint a skunk on it. Okay, Trevor, we're going to do that. So, but the question for me relates to the technology. So here, we created a little space and we provided some funding for some technology, and great, wonderful things happen. In this one, I want you to speak to, and I'm looking at you, Ray, whomever else wants to, but the notion of BYOD, you bring your own device, and for me, it struck me that, is it reasonable for me to think that if we create the space in the gallery, and it's under construction now actually, for the fall, unstructured space, except it'll be ready to go wired-wise, but people will have to bring their own devices. Is it reasonable to think that that's enough to get some of this idea generation going and creating the spaces that, Lynne, you talked about? Am I being unreasonable as an expectation outcome or not?
Well, from my perspective, no. I think it's forward-looking, it's innovative, and it allows, because you're creating a space that others will populate, you're allowing a space for people to develop. The device issue, let's say, is infrastructure, can be a fraught one, especially when there are economic considerations that would mean that some would have devices and some wouldn't, and only you and your colleagues will know best how that translates. But, if we were to do that, let's say at my lab in Victoria, we would have 2/3 of people with great computers and 1/3 without. And so we'd have to find a way of addressing what would be a very unequal relationship among people who would like to be equal partners.
Right.
So too around more expensive infrastructure devices. So it might be reasonable to expect people maybe to have a smartphone, or some people to have a smartphone, some to have a high-powered laptop. But when you start getting into 3D printing technology and other types of robotics and so on, that may be less reasonable. Infrastructure, I think, for the type of space you're talking about, you know this better than I do, is not only about physical walls, floor, tables. It's not only about the materials that people have to work with. It's ensuring that there's an appropriate intellectual infrastructure that rewards the sort of work that's being done there. And this is where I think the Skunk Works model, which didn't just come to me as I heard other people talking, it's something I've been thinking about for a long time, but it seemed particularly appropriate given the comments preceding mine. This is where I think the Skunk Works comes into place, because there was a designated area, the original and then the models that have come out of it, a designated area for people to play. Maybe not to have water gun fights during department meetings, but there's that element of whimsy that then also suggests acceptance of intellectual ideas beyond the norm. It's a place of free and creative thinking versus thinking in line with mandated targets and so on. If you can find a way of rewarding that, I think that's probably even more valuable than the walls and the computers.
But what do you mean by rewarding?
Rewarding that free intellectual experimentation.
Yeah, I get that, but I guess what would those rewards even look like for the people coming into these spaces?
Well, you know, if you look at, groups like the Scholars Lab at the University of Virginia, I think also what happens at University of California, Santa Barbara, we're trying to do at least as much as we're able to in our system at UVic. You look at ways of giving people a bit of time.
So,
It's a pretty valuable commodity.
yeah.
You could give a teaching release, maybe award it as a fellowship for someone to be a resident in that space, working on a project that perhaps they've articulated in advance. They say, I want to explore area X, here's how it might look. Can I come with some of my students, maybe some industry partners that are interested in this sort of thing? And can I have some time off so that I've got the freedom and the intellectual space to be able to do something in that physical space?
I think Danny had a...
Yeah, just to build on that, I mean, I agree physical infrastructure is one thing, but it's the workload and the coursework all the time on the students' part that is really critical to keeping these projects going and at the center of focus, right? So that they don't just get pushed off the side of the desk with heavy, coursework on both sides. So having a way to allow things to remain on the desk and be at the center for both the faculty, but also critically for students, right? Which isn't to say just about, say, work ops or something like that, which can be a component part of it, but something that combines or allows for maybe the monetary component in the case of an internship or co-op, but also credit.
Can I speak to that too? Scholars Lab, I think, provides an incredible example of how to do that, because students sign up for what's basically a practicum or an internship, and they can do several, and they get paired up not only with professors and researchers who are doing interesting work in their area, but also get paired up with those from the external community. And that's one way of acknowledging, I think, exactly what you're saying. They found a way to make it work. We haven't figured out how to make it work at UVic yet, but we're trying.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
I just wanted to speak to what you've been discussing. I know at VIU, for instance, in the liberal studies department, these students create artworks. They should be part of that space.
Well, in fact, that's the intent. They're part of that faculty. It's arts and humanities focused.
Right. So that's good to know, because they are looking at things from a multidisciplinary perspective, and to be able to bring that into art is really significant, because they are working from the idea, making it manifest. And if you have technology access there, people can be looking more at installations, art installations, not just pictures that canvases on the wall. And the technologies will give them that opportunity.
Good. Thank you. Any other questions or comments from our panel? Any self-reflexive comments from our panel? Okay. Well, I'd love to thank the panel again. It was very dynamic, interesting, and came together really nicely. So thank you, guys.